vocoder is just an equalizer where the bands get controlled by another signal.
Let me show you what I mean. So here I've got two samples. I've got these chords, and I've got these drums. And my goal is to transfer some characteristics from the drums onto the chords. First, I'm going to look at the frequency spectrum. So on the top is the chords, on the bottom is the drums. And I'll turn them down just a bit. So you can see the chords have a lot of harmonics because they're saw waves, and the drums don't have as many harmonics. And you can see the shape of the drums is actually kind of a curve. I can recreate that curve on the chords using a bandpass. And if I make it steeper, then it's going to resemble the frequency response of the drums. Yeah, so it's already sounding a bit more similar. But now let's look at the waveforms themselves. You can see the drums have this curve to them. So I want to recreate that with the chords as well. And you could do that by automating the volume, but this volume slider only goes to -18 decibels, and I need -infinity decibels. So what I'm going to do instead is animate the volume, create an automation clip. I'm going to try and copy the shape of that drum tail, something like this, and then copy paste it a few times to get that repeating drum pattern. Might be a bit too much. Yeah, so now that's starting to sound a bit more like the drums. So let's bring in the drums again. So there we go, congratulations, we just made a single band vocoder powered by child labor. Now obviously this example is very lucky because not every wave can be approximated with just a single bandpass. For example, my voice is going to have all kinds of peaks and troughs going all over the spectrum. If only there was a way that we could approximate any function given a ton of bandpasses, that would be so convenient, and then you could use it on any kind of shape.
So that's exactly what we're seeing here with Vocodex. I'm vocoding myself to white noise. Sounds like this. And that gives me a very clean result. Now, I've got 100 bands, which means 100 band passes. But if I drop it down a little bit, you can start to see it getting crunchy. So let's drop it to 70, getting a bit more crunchy. Drop it to 44, even more crunchy. Drop it down to 18, super crunchy. And obviously, the more I have, the more easily it's going to approximate that function. And you can see that it matches exactly with the equalized result of my voice. There's a few more parameters here that are kind of interesting. One of them is the order of the filter, and that refers to the steepness. For example, this would be a very steep filter, and this would be a much less steep filter. The less steep it is, the more harmonics it's going to let out on either side. So if I decrease the order to 1, you can hear how crunchy that sounds because it's letting in all the harmonics on either side. So the steeper it is, the more quality you're going to get. And this, the flatness, also gives you some control over the shape. So in this setting, I think it's more like the shape you see here. But if you have a steep one, it'd be more like combining a steep low pass and a steep high pass. And then you have this control that changes the width of the bands, much like this changes the width of the bands. And if you make them really narrow, you get this metallic sound. And then, of course, you get the attack and release time, and that controls the envelope. So if you make it very slow, it sounds like I'm in a cave and I'm in Minecraft or something like that. And the other thing you can do is freeze the spectrum, which is really cool for making textures. For example, or E. And you can imagine this button is really useful for stretching out audio infinitely. And they actually use this in what's called a phase vocoder. The only difference is it keeps the phase intact as well.
Now I want to show you how to make your own vocoder. I'm in FL Studio, but the same idea applies to any other audio software. So here I've got 2 tracks set up. I've got my voice, hello, hello. I'm going to use my voice to modulate these chords. So the first step is routing. I've got this third track called the vocoder, and I'm going to sidechain both the modulator and the carrier to that track. And you can do that by right-clicking and choosing sidechain to this track only. So I'm sidechaining both of these to the vocoder track. Now on the vocoder track, I'm going to add a new effect, Patcher. Patcher lets you build your own simple effects. And what we need to use in Patcher is 2 different effects. One of those is for equalization. For that, I'm going to do add plugin, and I'm going to choose the frequency splitter. The frequency splitter gives you 3 bands to work with, which is good enough for now, and it's quite simple to set up and use. So this one I'm going to use to analyze the signal, and then I'm going to use another one to change the signal. Then I'm going to need 3 things to measure the volume. You can go to Add Plugin and choose Fruity Peak Controller. And each of these peak controllers measures the volume, and we can use that to control the bands. Because there's 3 bands, we need 3 peak controllers. So you can go 3 and add another one. Alright, disconnect the output, and I'm going to disconnect the input. I actually want to use a different input. We have the option to use the modulator and the carrier from the sidechain input. So let's listen to the modulator and put it through the frequency splitter and then output. Alright, so it looks like it's working, and I can drop out certain frequencies. So now the idea is to measure the loudness of each of these bands. To do that, we need to send them all to an output. So I'll send the low to output 1, the mid to output 2, and the high to output 3. Then to access those outputs, you need to right click, go to Audio Outputs, and enable Send 1, enable Send 2, and enable Send 3. And this should be the low frequencies, mid frequencies, and high frequencies. I'll just check that by enabling my voice again. Now I'll disconnect the main input and connect the low input. Mid input sounds like mids to me. And the highs, that sounds like the highs to me. So now we know all of these frequencies are set up. We can put each of them into a peak controller to measure the loudness, route the lows into this one, the mids into this one, and the highs into this one. So if we look at each of them, we can see the signal changing, which means it's working. But one thing we can do to get a better quality result is to decrease the decay speed. The more decay you have, the more it's going to stay near the original signal position. But I want it to snap much faster, so I'm going to set the decay on all of them to be very low. And now the final thing is modulating the lows, mids, and highs of this frequency splitter based on these peak controllers. You can do that by right-clicking it, going to Parameters, enabling low main output, enabling mid main output, and enabling high main output. Then on each of these peak controllers, you can right-click, choose Controllers, enable peak, again, controllers, enable peak, and connect each of these outputs to the same inputs. And now if we look at the frequency splitter, you can see all the bands jumping around based on the loudness of my voice. And now we can route in the chords. So I'm going to take the carrier, which is the chords, and route it into the frequency splitter. And then I can send that to the output. And now we've created the vocoder. Hello, hello. So I'm going to mute my voice. Alright, so thank you for watching. I've also made some presets you can download from my GitHub page, including this 3-band vocoder, which is also based on the same setup, as well as another 3-band vocoder, uses a bunch of regular EQs and then modulates it using Panomatic. So thank you for watching, I'll see you later.